This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is the show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes or Apple Podcast, type in Old Dogs, DAWGS, find our podcast and subscribe. Well, we have a special show for you today. I'm real stoked about. We have somebody who's on that is a good friend of mine and a fellow, should I say, indie investor that certainly knows a lot more about Indianapolis than I do. Her name is Kimberly Marie, and she is a doctor of physical therapy, published model, and active real estate investor based in Indianapolis. She started her journey investing as a residential fix and flip and buy and hold investor in her surrounding neighborhood, all while practicing as a full-time physical therapist. Kimberly has spent the last 5 years of her journey becoming an expert in Indianapolis real estate, the acquisition process, construction, and now buying and operating multifamily apartment buildings, which is her current primary real estate focus. She leverages her decade of experience in the physical therapy world to foster strong relationships with both her team and her investors to get deals done. She is the final decision maker for all business operations, including new acquisitions, dispositions, and investor relations. Well, Kimberly, welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Hi, Bill. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. This is great. I always love when somebody has a great story to share, and I'm just amazed at all the things that you're doing there. Not just your real estate investing, but you've got a full-time practice, or at least maybe it's more part-time now. But when you started out, it was full-time, and just kicking it right now. And a lot of people are a little bit, a little kind of holding back a little bit because of COVID and all the things that have happened. But it doesn't seem like it slowed you down any.
I'm lucky.
I'd love to just kind of hear your story. Where you grew up and how you got into both the physical therapy and later into the real estate investing.
Yeah, certainly. So I originally grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and I moved to Indianapolis when I first came here for school. So I went to University of Indianapolis, and I chose that school because it was a great physical therapy school. And also I played D2 tennis on their tennis team all 4 years. And so a little bit of scholarship money made it really enticing to come here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I always thought I'd go back to Chicago, but here I am, 11, 12 years later, still here. Because once I graduated, that's when I kind of fell into real estate. I originally got into it when I graduated the first time from graduate school. I got my PT assistant license. Then I decided I wanted to go back to get my doctorate of physical therapy, so my DPT. And when I did that, I had already paid off my first student debt, and I was working, and I was calculating out, like, man, if I went back to school for 3 years now as an adult, how am I going to pay that back? And that was right when I bought my first home in a gentrifying area of Indianapolis. I bought it in Fountain Square neighborhood, and I kind of was looking around and saw all of the development around me, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to flip a house and see if I can pay off my new student loans that way. And so that was the beginning of the story. And from there, I kind of transitioned out of flipping to something more passive towards buy and hold single family. And now what I'm focused on is multifamily commercial acquisitions, because my goals have drastically changed since starting. I was only 24, 25 years old, and in the weeds. I was on the property every day and checking up on contractors and really getting my hands dirty, versus right now, I'm done with school. I'm done with all these other things, and I just want to kind of be more of a passive investor. And that's when multifamily made so much more sense. So that's my focus now.
Wow. That's well, okay. Well, I got to take a step back a little bit here. So you're looking at paying off student loans. You think, hey, I'll flip a house. Okay. Most people aren't going to do that. I mean, okay. And plus, I mean, your background isn't exactly in construction or even real estate in any way, shape, or form. You were a physical therapist. Why did you pick flipping of all things?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it because when I bought my house, it was in Fountain Square and it was 2015. And at the time, I was kind of not scared of the neighborhood, but I was really apprehensive. My realtor at the time turned me onto it and said, oh, there's all this development, there's this, there's that. But I moved years ago to Indianapolis, and Fountain Square was the hood. Like anytime, and I was like, yeah, everyone's always saying Fountain Square is turning around. They've been talking about that for 4 years, 5 years. It's turning around. But then she was really like, no, like give it a chance, be open-minded. So once I bought my house, I started walking around the neighborhood because I more so just because I was curious, but also to protect myself. I was single, I was living by myself. And then eventually when I had a roommate, she was also a small frame female. So I was like, I need to make sure that we're safe. And I just was really just, instead of driving for dollars, what people call it, I was literally just walking for dollars and didn't even know it. I would see a house down the road and I'd walk through it and just kind of see what's going on. $50,000, let's just say. And then 4 months later, someone buys it and flips it, and I see it on the market, because I would still scroll through the market to just pay attention to what the neighbors were doing. And I would see it and wow, it's now $250,000. And then I'd go and walk it when it was done. And so I just kind of kept doing that because I was interested in seeing who my neighbors were. And then once I did it enough, I was like, wow, I think I have a really good handle on this. I think I know what people are looking for. I know what people are doing. I know what this house looked like before and after. I see how they built it because I would walk by all the time like, hey, I think I'm going to try this. So it was kind of a situation where it was sink or swim. And I was really, really fortunate to have a supportive mother who I call her all the time and just blab to her for 30 minutes straight. And so she's a good listener. So she would listen to what I was doing and what my vision was and what my goal was. She was like, yeah, I think, you have the knowledge, you're walking around. And so I just kind of learned from just being here. So I'm not a very big spreadsheet map person. I always just kind of go see for myself what it was. So I just kind of fell into it.
Interesting. And I mean, you picked one of the hottest areas of Indianapolis. I mean, Fountain Square, it just went overnight. It just took off. When I started investing there, it was already, pretty hot and prices were up. And I kind of went into the Bates Hendricks area, which is up and coming as well, but not as hot as Fountain Square by any means.
Yeah.
Now, you bought in that area initially just for yourself first, or was your first house your flip?
No, I bought my first house as a primary residence. I was living there, because I had just graduated. I figured that was the adult thing to do, just buy a house. And I just, like you said, I got so lucky. It was a slam dunk deal. It was the cheapest house on the block at the time, but it was completely gut to the studs renovated. So I had no issues with it at all. And I was 3 blocks from the center of Fountain Square. So I was a slam dunk. I had no idea what I had found, nor where the neighborhood was going and what the market was about to do. So I really was just in the right place at the right time. But actually, though, in 2015, now that I'm really involved in the real estate world here, I see that even condos that were being built new downtown, because I was looking for a 2-bed, 2-bath minimum, I was looking at this condo that was like $265,000. And at the time I thought that was so expensive. I look now, it's like almost doubled in value in these places. And so I think 2015 was like a huge year for Indy, like 2015, 2016, like there were so many great deals to be had. And I don't think anybody realized how big the market was about to turn.
Yeah, I bought at the kind of the end of 2015 and bought a little duplex, and same thing, it just quadrupled in value in a relatively short period of time. I mean, it's a hot area, but I'm just kind of curious now. The house you bought, you didn't have to do any work to, right? I mean, it was completely upgraded. You didn't have to put any work into it.
No, I did nothing at all. I added a backsplash and then added a carport and a shed. So my first flip was a complete renovation. I mean, this place was burned down to the ground. Like there was a bunch of cats in it. It was like there was like barely a roof on it. So it was quite an undertaking. It was completely different than anything I had ever done. So it was just kind of like a sink or swim type of thing. But I ended up finding that contractor again from walking around. I would find different houses that I liked, and he would show me his job sites, and I would always see people on site. I would walk through, I would see that it was good work. And then I said, hey, you want to take this huge project on? And so he did. So, and I was really lucky to find a good contractor on the first one like that. He hit his timelines. He did great work. He did exactly what I expected of him. So I got really, really lucky.
And how did you know, what to even look for? I mean, I know you said you saw and you knew it looked good, but for the most part, in terms of working with contractors and cost of materials and all the other factors, the timelines, did you just kind of learn that as you went along?
Yeah, I did learn it as I went along. And there were other contractors, too, that I was trying to screen and talk to. So when I get their line items, I can kind of compare contractor to contractor. But also being a physical therapist, I think one of my really good skill sets is being able to read people very well. So I was able to tell, like, if a contractor was trying to just fluff their feathers and be like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And then I show up on their job site because I'm walking by and maybe there's nobody there, or maybe the job site's really dirty, or maybe you can kind of see them cutting little corners. And I'm like, I don't really like that. Versus someone else who's true to their word, their prices are fair. I see people on site all the time, contractors who are working or respectful, things like that. So I think it was kind of a combination. I don't think there was one specific mixture of one thing in a person.
In that first house, you said you paid $50,000 for it?
No. So I found it was pretty cheap because it was the quote unquote east of state stigma at the time. Mm-hmm. And it was 1 block east of state. And I think I paid like $30,000 or $35,000 for it. So it was pretty cheap, but it had all these back taxes. And like I said, it was totally burned down. So at the end of the day, I ended up putting in about $250 into it. Wow. And we sold it for $318,500.
Oh, gee. Not bad at all. Wow. And then you took the proceeds from that to purchase another fix and flip?
Yeah. So some of it I was paying off my student loan debt. But then, at that point, that's right when I was like, wow, like, I've really figured, because at the time then I met all the neighbors and I kind of just started going down the street. I at one point had about 8 houses or 9 houses on the same street. And then I was planning on flipping them all. But then as I progressed, my goals changed towards wanting to do more buy and hold. So if I would buy something, I would then offload it and have my broker Corey sell it off for me because I would always buy it at a really good price. So then he would just sell it and then I would buy like a rental. And then I kind of started more so transitioning into rentals.
Gotcha. Now you said 8 houses going at one time. I mean, were you doing hard money loans or how were you financing all this?
Yeah, so I never had them all going at once, but I at one point owned them all at once.
Okay.
So the most I ever had going at one time was 3, and I felt like I was drowning. So the original way I financed it was through my personal home. So I bought it at a really good price, and then I was able to refinance like 2 or 3 times in the first year and pull a ton of equity out. So out of my own personal home, I think I got like $78,000 out of it. And then my mom, like I said, she was very, very supportive of my business. And, I freaked out one time and said my very first flip, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this. I'm scared. Oh, I don't know. And she became an investor. And so she went 100% all in with me. Like, we both liquidated our brokerage accounts for our stocks, mutual funds, everything except retirement, basically. And he locked her own house. So she pulled out all the equity of her own house. And so that was how we were able to do the first one. We kind of just scraped together the 250. And then once we did it once, then, my sister's an ophthalmologist, and then my uncle does real estate in California. And so then it was a lot easier to get them on board once they saw me do it once, because, I'm the youngest daughter, and they thought, oh, she's being emotional, or she doesn't know what she's doing, or, the typical naysay thing when you do something new. And then when my mom and I did it, we're like, hey, look, like, we made like 50 to 60 grand on this first one, all based on what I plan to do. And they're like, oh, okay. So you're not just doing this because it's a fad. Like, this is a real thing. You're actually educating yourself. You're actually going and networking, and you're doing the numbers. And, so it was a lot easier after that. I've done construction loans before, but most of it's come from my own family.
Gotcha. For the most part, then you were paying cash for these homes that you were buying. Did you ever end up financing any of the homes you bought?
Yeah, I do. I finance my the rentals that I buy, for sure, but it's just a lot harder to do that for flips. But like I said, now, I have one flip left that's in finishes right now. They're literally putting in like fixtures and fans and stuff to like be ready to stage. So after that one, I don't think I'm going to do single family flips anymore. If anything, I would want to do more larger developments like apartments. It's just a lot of work.
Oh, sure. Well, it's pretty amazing. Jumping right into this and no background in construction, no background in real estate, and just going crazy. You moved at a smart time, though. That was the time when that area was just taking off, and so it sounded like your timing was excellent. I imagine it's harder to find deals today there.
Oh, yeah. I think it's certainly a lot harder to find deals, but also I think there are still deals to be had. And I think, for anybody, I know your audience is 55 plusers and might be newer to real estate. And I think the biggest thing will be, in whatever neighborhood you are, whatever market it is to be sure that you really educate yourself and know your neighborhood and your zip code that you want to do like the back of your hand. Like, I was extremely confident, and still am, whenever I make any purchase or whenever I decide to do anything, because I literally know, like, on this street, for instance, that I had planned on flipping 8, but I only ended up flipping half of those. I was able to say who bought what for where, how long they've been living there, what finishes were in those new houses, who's flipping the old ones. And so I literally was like a psycho in the neighborhood. Like, I would walk everywhere, and I would walk on every job site, and I would see it with my own eyes. And so even now, in the middle of a pandemic, a lot of people might be scared, and I'm aware of that. I don't know what the market's going to do either, but when I see a good deal and your market and you're very certain in what you're doing, you take away a lot of the risk by just knowing those things. And I think that's super valuable. And I don't think anyone should ever discredit themselves, or because I almost did it on my very first one. I almost got cold feet. And thank goodness for my mom saying, no, I've been listening to you. You've been doing your research. You've been doing this. You know your stuff. Don't get scared.
Pretty amazing that, I think that's just a part of real estate investing. If you really want to be successful, you just go for it. And you don't get discouraged. And there'll be those times when you do make, the bad moves here and there. But as long as you keep moving forward, and as long as you keep persistent, and keep the tenacity, you're going to do okay.
Right, exactly. And with that, though, obviously we want to avoid mistakes as much as we can. But I see this a lot of times in just either colleagues or friends of mine who I know do real estate investing. I find a lot of times, especially if we're getting really deal hungry, or if the market's been really dry and they just really want to buy something, I notice a lot of times someone might walk a deal that's not right for them and forget what their goal is and forget what they're looking for, and just say, oh, well, this will work. And they try to make that property fit what they're looking for when it doesn't. And, I'm really the first one to be like, okay, let's remove the emotions out of this. What is this house going to do for you? What are the returns that you're looking for? What is your exit strategy? What is your strategy at all? Like, why you want to buy this house? And I feel like a lot of people, might just forget that. And it's like, no, this isn't the right house for you. Stick to your guns. Because I think that's when a lot of people make mistakes, is when they really try to make this property what they want when it's not. And so you have to know when to do it, but you also have to know when to not.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you definitely were educating yourself in this process too. I mean, you had to acquire that knowledge from somewhere. You just got this really good feel, and almost seems like you've been investing for a lot longer than you have. I mean, how did you sort of ramp up that fast?
Yeah. So once I started getting my interest in it, I just knew that I needed to know more. Like, my uncle does real estate in California, and my mom always would suggest to me, hey, you should call your uncle and ask him. And I literally would be in this point where I don't even know what I would ask him. I have so many questions, but I don't even know what I want to ask. Like, I'm that uneducated. And so I started reading different books, of course, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but then other actual educational books about real estate investing. I started listening to podcasts. And actually, Bill, you were the very first podcast I ever listened to. For Indianapolis, I literally searched Indianapolis real estate, and you popped up, and your podcast helped me start. I would listen to all your podcasts, your Fun Fact Fridays, all of your guests that you had on. And that was super, super helpful for me to educate myself and be like looking at all aspects of real estate. And then be able to hone in and say, hey, I've heard all these people speak. I've read my own stuff. And I would take little things from the different podcasts or books that I was reading and just apply it to Indy and apply it to my business. So thank you for that.
Well, no, I mean, it's great. It's great to hear. I'm kind of overwhelmed here, but
no. Seriously, it's great. Since 2016, I've been like your biggest fan. So it's really cool to actually be a guest. So,
hey, you've got such a great story. I'd love to. That's one of the exciting things is when you talk to people that. Maybe, you met when they were just getting started, and then you see, now you're in multifamily. Tell us more about that. I want to hear kind of, okay, so you start off flipping, you're doing the flipping, then you start to kind of ease into buy and hold, and then, now you're moving in this total focus toward multifamily. How did that come about?
Yeah. So I think my whole journey has been kind of fluid. I'm very goal oriented. And so I always remember like what my goal is. My goal originally was, hey, I'm going to have $100,000 of student debt I need to pay off. How am I going to do that? Then, obviously I did well on my first flip. And then, from there I had more and more flips and just different like things like that. And so I was like, well, now I don't want to babysit contractors. I don't want to, do this game. I want more tax benefits. As I was getting older, I was learning about that. So then I said, well, I'm going to buy a rental and different rentals. And as you know, Bill, your rental, it's in a wonderful area, Bates Hendricks. Most of mine are actually right surrounding you, either in Fountain Square or in Old South Side, like right around it. And so the same thing, I really understood the area. I knew what people were looking for since I started as a consumer. And the more rentals I started to acquire, I was like, wow, why? This is great. Like, you work really hard to get it to the closing table. Once it closes, it's pretty easy. So, versus having to work really, really, really hard from day one of the flip until the closing table when you're selling it, it's like way, way, way easier and more hands off. And so once I had a handful of rentals under my belt, I was thinking, why am I doing this much work for a duplex? Like, what if I just did this much work for a building and got 10 units at once or 20 units at once or 100 units at once? And once I started transitioning and doing more research on that, I realized it's so much easier to go bigger. It's easier to get financing. It's easier to make money. It's easier to manage. Like, everything is easier, really, other than, obviously a bigger down payment. But if you're able to find the funds, everything is easy. The biggest building I have right now is a 23 unit. It's in Mapleton Fall Creek area of Indianapolis. So it's just north of the city and just south of Broad Ripple. So it's in this kind of no man's land right now. And it's a C-class property. But honestly, I never hear about it. The manager takes care of all issues. I get my money at the end of the month. I get reports. And if I have a question, I set up a meeting with them, and it's been the most hands-off, easy investment I've had versus the flips where I have to constantly have meetings, constantly be on site, or even my single family, which I'm still self-managing. it's like, if a tenant contacts me, it's like I feel so obligated to answer them right then and there and fix their problem that day. And like, oh no, like they have a leak or they have a toilet that's not flushing or they have this issue. It's like immediate stress. So I have found, just through different, now education on multifamilies, it's a lot easier, and that's really in line with my goals.
Are you still self-managing any of your properties then?
I am. So all of my single family, I still self-manage, but I'm also in the process of offloading them too, since I want to go bigger.
Gotcha. And you're just going to sell them outright to purchase multifamily?
Yeah. I just had one move out, literally, actually two move out yesterday. So I'm in the process of getting my cleaner in there and getting pictures and getting it listed. So one at a time, I'm just going to kind of start offloading them to, like you said, just kind of pool my money together and go into a bigger deal.
Have you noticed a change in the market in Indy since COVID?
I think it's harder to find a good deal. I think not a lot of people are selling right now because they just don't know what's going to happen. But I also think the people who are selling at a really high price. So I don't know. I think it's just kind of a weird spot right now with this market. So it's just kind of strange. And is it because of COVID or who knows? Probably, but I don't know that I'm the expert to be able to speak on that. I've just noticed it's just strange right now.
Yeah, I think that's going on nationwide right now. Everyone's really waiting to see what happens in November, and that could reveal a lot. And I think people that have homes realize that that's sort of their cash cow if things get rough or what have you. So I think there's a lot of reticence. People just kind of waiting and seeing what happens.
Right.
So venturing into multifamily, what's sort of your next target property you're looking at? In terms of size and maybe location and so forth.
Yeah, location, I definitely want to stay in the Indy metro area. I don't like to veer out of that very often. I'm always open-minded and I'll look at deals in other markets, but at this point, I feel so comfortable with Indianapolis and I feel so educated on it. Like I was talking about earlier, I feel like with all of my obsessive education over Indianapolis, I've really eliminated a lot of the risk. So I think I would do myself a disservice to leave this market now with what I know. But my next step, I would say I would really love to get like 100 units. I have about 40 right now. And so if I could find a 60 to 70 unit to close, like that would be awesome. So like I said, surrounding Indy areas, but I'm not opposed to something smaller. Last week, I walked a 28 unit. Personally, it wasn't a great fit, but I'll walk anything just to kind of educate myself on what's out there and see what sellers are wanting right now and what their prices are per unit and their cap rates and their expenses and all that type of stuff. So I feel like I'm always learning, but my goal, if it were a perfect world, I would say 60 to 70 units is my next step.
Right. Well, that's great. Are you actively pursuing, are you ready to buy right now?
Maybe not today, right this second, but I'm actively pursuing as though I am because I actually closed on a refinance this morning. And in a couple of weeks here, I actually refinanced that 23 unit building and I'm pulling quite a bit of money out of that. And I'm liquidating my single families. So once I do a lot of that, I feel like I'll have a good, healthy, down payment to find for a bigger apartment like that. So but I also know that I'm not going to find this apartment today. So I actively have to be looking right now in order to maybe find it in 30 to 60 days, something that's a good fit for me.
Right. Well, you mentioned, or maybe I that mentioned it earlier on, is that you were full-time in physical therapy, but you're pulling back. And so, tell me sort of what are your plans with real estate investing? Are you still want to maintain a practice and continue doing that, part-time? Do you eventually see yourself going full-time in the real estate side? What are sort of your looking ahead there, your focus?
Yeah, so I love physical therapy. Like I said, I got my doctorate in it, so I feel like, I should at least work part-time. And I see patients 3 days a week right now, and my company is really great with my schedule. So, they give me health insurance and the benefits. And so that's a nice little safety net for me right now. And it was actually kind of nice with COVID because, I was furloughed for about 2 months. And so I was like, okay, it's time to hustle with my real estate business. Let's see what this would be like if this was full time. And I felt like, at the time I still had 3 flips that I had going on. And, my focus was kind of split. It wasn't able to just be on multifamily. And so I feel like now that those are off my plate, it might be a different story right now, but I really would like to hit that 100 unit mark before even considering going full-time in real estate, because I just feel like I don't have enough tasks. Like I don't manage my 23 unit on my own. I have a manager for that. And it's not like I necessarily want to take that on either. And, there's certain things that I like to do in my business. Like I'm really good at operations and I'm really good at finding the deals. But as far as like cold calling owners or underwriting the deal or doing all these numbers, like those things, like I would rather delegate to other people at this point because I'm so strong in what I'm good at. And so I think if I were to fill my days, I would really need to have more doors and more properties and more resources to sit on to where I would be busy and really make the best use of my time.
Great. Well, you definitely plowed ahead here. In just a very short period of time, you just ramped up and, like you said, you're up to what, 38 doors so far?
Yeah, about that, right around 40.
40 doors. What would you say is sort of one of your biggest mistakes that you really learned from in this process?
I would say biggest mistake is very similar to what I described earlier not to do, is try to make something fit a mold of what you want it to be. I made the same mistake twice and hired the wrong contractor who did the exact same thing to me. And so I found myself in 2 different lawsuits. And so that was also another reason I wanted to get away from flipping, is because I was like, man, these contractors are...
Yikes.
But, I met a contractor and, I was like shiny object syndrome, like, oh, this guy's great. He's going to give me the world. And, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I'm going to have all these flips for him and we're going to do great things. And then they just bit off more than they can chew, like too much. And I don't think they're bad people. I think they had ambition and I think they had goals of their own. And I think we could have mutually helped each other. But I just think that it was my bad to put too much faith in them that they would be able to do what they said they're going to do. I mean, it's not like I was just going in these houses and painting the walls and replacing the doors. And no, like I was literally taking them down to the studs. I was replacing foundations and subfloors and moving walls. I mean, it was a very big undertaking. And so I don't think just any contractor can take that on. And so I would think that, that was definitely my biggest mistake, because I just was like, oh, I'm going to hire this guy and he's going to be great and, whatever. And I wasn't screening them properly. So I would say that was certainly my biggest mistake, because I could have done without that for sure.
Right. And so how did you kind of correct it in the future? You just, because you don't always know what their workload is. I mean, they're working with you, but you don't always know how many other clients and jobs they have going. How do you kind of prevent that from happening again?
Exactly. So this guy that I am now working with, from the get-go, I locked down. Obviously, I wasn't going to make the same mistake 3 times, but they were way more professional. And like I said, I think it's a big picture thing. I don't think there's like step 1, step 2, step 3 to screen for someone. They took me into their office. And it's funny you mentioned you never know what projects they have going on, because in that man's office, he had a huge magnetic whiteboard that had every single house that they were working on and in what phase it was, whether it was in the designing planning phase, whether it was in the construction phase, or whether it was in finishes. And I was looking at these and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is all in my neighborhood. I've walked by these houses before. I've spoken to their crew. So, of course, then I would revisit these job sites and, I screened very, very diligently for these people. And I also asked them as a company what their goals were, because I had my own goals. And obviously it's transitioning into multifamily, but I was like, hey, what are your guys' goals here? Like, obviously you're flipping single family homes, like, blah, blah, blah. I let them talk and we really had great conversations, like colleague to colleague. I didn't feel like, oh, this is just my contractor that I'm hiring for a flip. Like they also had goals and the resources and the team to be like, hey, eventually we want to start developing multifamily. And sure enough, here we are, like 2 years later, I've been working with these guys and they're building a 10 unit over in Twin Air. And I was like, wow, like that's great. And, I was like, this is exactly what I would want to do. And so I feel like the company and me are really growing together and we mutually benefit each other. And I think that's very important. So I think I'm certain that they would not do the same thing to me as the other guys did. They're just way more professional and very organized and all of that.
That's great. That's great. What would you say would be your biggest success that you've done since you started this?
Biggest success. I would say probably my apartment building. Because not only was that a success, like if I were to say to myself when I first started, like, hey, in 3 years, you're going to close a 23 unit apartment, I would never believe it. But then also, now that I accomplished that, like I set a goal, accomplished it, but then also to look at financials and the amount of time I'm spending and the returns and everything, like that's the easiest building that I have. Like it's so low maintenance for me to handle. So I would certainly say that would be the biggest one.
Did you do any rehab on that?
Very, very little. It was generally well maintained and pretty well managed before. So it was very little things that I had to do, like little things with the parking lot and the common areas and things like that. But it wasn't that much. Most of the value that I increased the value of the property, of course, with this refinance, but most of it was just kind of bumping rents and recognizing who was just undervalued. Like I had like a number of Section 8 people and IHA people in there with utilities included. And I kind of came in there and said, well, what's the minimum right now? Can we bump this or can we do a little improvements or whatever. And so we just kind of kept getting more of those people out and better people in and just kind of keeping the tenant demographic at just a little bit higher of a standard. And I think that's been really helpful because they also take care of the building a lot better too.
That's great. That's great. Well, you've had a real nice cross section of experience and from flipping to buy and hold to multifamily. And what kind of advice would you have for our audience? Okay, these are folks that are starting later in life. I mean, you're still very young, and you could, you have a long ways ahead of you yet. But for the folks that are starting later, now they have the advantage in that maybe they've got a little bit of a nest egg and something to help them get started. But from your experience, what do you think would be a way? Because again, they don't want to spend 20 years, building it up. They want to do something to ramp up fairly quickly and then get to the income level that they want to. Exactly. What would your advice be?
Step one, I would say, because my parents are the perfect audience for who would be listening to your podcast. My dad is 65 and my mom is 67. And my dad and my mom are so drastically different in their viewpoints and everything. They're very happily married, by the way. But on my journey, my mom really had my back and was extremely open-minded. I'm sure the audience has heard every guest talk about the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I started reading the book and I said, Mom, would you read this with me? And she said, of course. So we read it together. And, halfway through the book, she calls me and is like, Kimberly, your father is poor dad all the way. Like, this is why he doesn't understand. Like, this is exactly his mindset. And so what I would say to your audience is just be very open-minded and don't think you know everything or don't say this and that and blah, 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 And I would just say, just stay very open-minded, educate yourself. Your podcast is a great starting platform with a ton of resources. Think about, there's so many different ways to go in real estate, whether, if they have a nest egg, do they want to syndicate with somebody younger and partner? Do they want to buy their own rental properties? Do they want to buy an apartment? Or, there's so many different things that they can do in a quick time frame. I started in 2016 and it's only been 4 years. So I think someone who's, my mom's age 67, by the time they're 71, I think they can do it for sure. But I think the key is going to be keeping the mind open and in a growth mindset and just always being ready to learn and keeping in mind like what their goal is going to be, because there's just so many different ways to do it.
That's great. Great advice. Now, since you are so young and you've got a ways ahead of you, where do you see you and, maybe 10, 20 years down the road in terms of your real estate business?
Man, that's always such a hard question to me because I've always been so focused on the short term. Like, obviously my goals are long term, but for me right now, I'm so focused on, okay, how do I offload my single families? So then therefore I can buy 60 to 70 units. And so then from there, it's like, okay, like one thing at a time. And so I feel like the more I've grown and the more I've learned and the more my business has taken turns, the more it's just like more doors have opened up. So 10, 20 years from now, I can't imagine the amount of people I'm going to know, and who I'm going to meet, and the education I'm going to have, and the things I'm going to learn, and just all the doors that'll open. I just don't know what that looks like. I mean, I know what I hope it looks like. I hope I would have 500 units in Indianapolis and 500 units in another location, and who knows. But for right now, I'm really focused, like, let's just say before I leave Indianapolis, because I would not want to stay here long term because I don't like the cold. I'd rather be out in California like you. But I really would like 500 units before I leave. I think that's a number that would make sense with the education that I have and with the market that's here. And once I have 500, I think that would be a good cushion to be able to change markets and just kind of go from there. But I hope, in 10 years, I'm able to educate other people and tell them like that they can do what I did. I didn't come from money. I was not from a privileged family. I just had drive and a vision of what I wanted and a supportive network around me. So anyone can do it.
That's great. That's great. I'm kind of curious too, when you went from you're mainly single family and some duplexes, was that your primary focus in the beginning?
Yeah, it was. It went completely from focused on flipping to focused on buying all these houses. I was like, I want 50 houses. This is great. And then it very rapidly changed after maybe like 8 months to a year to say, well, no, I really actually think I want an apartment.
So going into the commercial, aspect too, borrowing. And so did you see a big difference between, trying to finance a house as opposed to a small apartment building?
I did, and I found it was actually easier. It was actually easier to get a loan. Like I've never bought something as expensive as my 23 unit prior to this. And I just feel like, because, they look at the net operating income and the gross income and the cap rate and how the building's performing as a business. And then they loan based on that. Like they don't look at anything else, versus for a single family, they look at the houses around you, which you can't control the other houses. So, and then they determine the value that way. So I found it was a lot easier. And like I said, luckily I had my mother who was very supportive and would sign on the loans for me. So, if I didn't have the net worth or the money to put down, like I was like, Mom, can I just use your signature? And she's like, absolutely, let's go.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Are you dealing with local banks or national banks? I mean, who's financing your commercial stuff? Are you working with a mortgage broker?
Yeah, mostly just local banks. Like I'm very relationship driven, and I have a really good relationship with the mortgage broker at just a local bank. And then as I just continue to kind of shop around with these refis and just more opportunities to purchase in the near future, it seems to be all local banks. Because when you get a smaller loan, anything under $1 million, like it's kind of difficult terms, like compared to what you can do with a larger deal. And it seems like the best people are the smaller banks to go to.
That's great. And are the rates still competitive at this time? Yeah,
I'm refinancing my 23 unit at a 3.5.
Gee whiz, that's awesome. That is
5.75 right now. And
wow.
I'm going to 3.5.
God, that's great. Yeah, I mean, because you're right. The smaller ones, if you're under $1 million, I mean, you don't get the Fannie Freddies. You don't, and so it is that weird little space. And sometimes you have to go to these outside lenders that that really jack up their rates. But that's awesome. That's great.
Right.
Wow. Well, neat. We have kind of zipped by here. I don't want to hold you too much longer, but we have what we call our wrap it up session. This is where I ask you a series of quick questions and you share resources that have been of value to you. So if you are ready, we can move into our wrap it up.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Favorite real estate book?
I would say Hayden Crabtree's Skip the Flip. So Hayden is a buddy of mine that I met at a real estate event. He is a hustler. He's only 24 years old, and he wrote this book. And he takes super complicated topics in real estate and simplifies them and presents them in a way that is so easy to understand and easy to read. And I think it's so valuable for everyone in the real estate journey. He originally wrote it for beginners, so 100% would really recommend this to your audience. But also, I've been doing it for 4 years now, and I read the book to support him, and I learned so much from it. It was like so many different nuggets and pieces of information and the way he lays out the info. And I count right now off the top of my head, 3 of my friends close to me who read the book and are so inspired after that. They're like, what? This is how it works? This is what you can do? This is crazy. And so I would certainly say Hayden Crabtree, Skip the Flip.
Interesting. Now, is it a flip book? Is it on flipping, or is it on just general real estate investing?
It is actually, yeah, with Skip the Flip, he recommends skipping that. Yeah. And he tells you why. He is personally into self-storage, but he just kind of tells his story and just kind of lays out different topics of, how do you underwrite? Why would you skip the flip? Here's all the different tax benefits. Here's all the different terms. Here's how you calculate cap rate and NOI. So it's like the very beginner book, but it lays out like really complicated things. Like I can't describe it. There's all this information in there, but I would certainly recommend it.
That's great. This is the first time I've heard that title. This is great. You got my curiosity going. That's great.
Yeah. He sells it on Amazon, so it's easy to find.
Oh, cool. Well, we'll have a link in the show notes for folks that want to check it out. How about just a general business book?
I would say Elena Cardone's Build an Empire.
Great. Grant's wife, right?
Yes, I really, really love her. I love what she's about. I love her goal and her vision and her journey. And I just loved her book, Build an Empire, because it's business related, but also it's a lot of like personal development too, which is something that's important to me. And hearing it from a woman's perspective, being a woman, it was great. And just hearing, I would certainly recommend that as well.
Great. How about the most valuable website for success?
For me personally, I would say CoStar, because I can look up all these different, buildings off market, on market, and it just lays out all the information right in front of you. So I would say CoStar is valuable for me since that's my focus is multifamily.
Okay, cool. How about favorite app?
Favorite app? I don't use apps a whole lot. I find myself scrolling Redfin a lot, but also I find myself scrolling CoStar a lot on the apps too. So I would say probably CoStar again for the app.
That's cool. That's great. I didn't even know they had an app. Interesting. What about favorite quote?
This one is a tough one too, because there's so many that I always live by, but I would say probably one of my favorites is, if you do not have a seat at the table, make one. And I feel like I've done this so many times, but also like very close friends of mine, I've seen them hustle and do this so many times where it's like, if you don't have a seat at the table, you make one, and there we go. And from there, I don't know. I just think it's so applicable to just everyone's life and business and careers.
That's great. And final question here. If you, let's say, lost absolutely everything, all your assets, and all you have left, and this is knowing what you know, all you have left is $1,000. What would you do with that $1,000 to rebuild your real estate investing business?
But you still have all the connections that you have?
Yeah. You have your connections, you and your knowledge that you have, but only $1,000 in cash.
I would say I would take the $1,000 and attend a multifamily real estate conference. And I would network the whole room and see who...
Network the heck out of it, right?
And learn how to syndicate.
That's great. I love it. All right. Wow. Well, this has been really, really great, Kimberly. It's so much good information in here. I'm sure there's probably people listening too that may want to connect. Maybe they're interested in investing or asking you questions, or maybe they're getting started out. And would you be open to contact with the folks in the audience?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I would love to talk to anybody. Happy to chat with anyone, answer any questions, and help them along with their journey. That's also one of my goals. Anyone can email me, kim@reddoorrenovation.com, or follow me on social media. Instagram is at Kimberly Marie 920.
Awesome. Great. Well, we've come to that part of the show here where you've got to just get your lungs ready here, and and you got to give us your best old closing indie howl. Are you ready?
Okay. Oh! Oh my gosh.
Well, that was pretty good. It's definitely, it was kind of like a hyena thing at the end there, but
Oh, sorry, my hyena laugh overtook it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being on, Kimberly. This has been a blast and a lot of great information.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. It's been such an honor being on the show that I've listened to for the last 4 years that helped me build my business. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, well, the pleasure was all ours. And I want to thank all our old dog listeners out there, too, for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us means a lot, and we really appreciate it. Please note, everything that Kimberly talked about today will be presented in detail in our very detailed show notes on the Old Dogs website at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog, and you're going to look for the episode with Kimberly Marie. Well, that's it for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.